The voice on the CB said his name before he keyed the mic. Dawson, it whispered through a mesh of static and diesel hum. Mile 23. Now. Dawson changed lanes with the easy flick of a man who had taught his body to measure distance with muscle. He drove a wrecker. Not one of the shiny new rigs with LED eyelashes, but an old white beast that wore its dents like talismans. The night had the geometry only highways get. Hard lines, long repeating reflectors, the yawning dark beyond the guardrails where America sleeps or doesn't. Mile 23, he said, playing along because talking into the dark beats talking to nobody. You buying the coffee? Now, the voice said again, and this time he thought he heard the breath you hear at the other end of a phone after bad news. Female, maybe, or the radio making choices. He could have ignored it. He could have passed the exit and gone on to the deer carcass the county wanted, dragged from mile 30. He didn't. He took the ramp like a man who has disappointed people enough to recognize the moment it stops being optional. Mile 23 was a cut through the hillside where the rock faces wore winter ferns like beards. The shoulder was narrow, and the rain had turned everything into different flavors of black. His headlights swept across a shape at the guardrail. Not a car, a person, arm crooked up at an odd angle, the way people raise their hands in classrooms when they want to ask the kind of question teachers hate. Christ, he said, and put on his flashers and eased to the shoulder. The shoulder hissed like a hot pan under the tires. He grabbed the kit from behind the seat and stepped out into rain that felt personal. You all right? He called. And then, because you have to be either a liar or a man of faith to ask that question in a night like this, you able to move? The shape by the rail didn't answer. He hit it with the flashlight beam and saw a girl, woman, really, late 20s maybe, hair plastered to her head like black seaweed. She wore a parka not meant for this kind of rain. Her face was pale and square at the jaw. She had one of those mouths that looks like it smiles more when the other person isn't looking. Hey, he said, you picking a place to sit is suboptimal. She blinked slowly. The rain dotted her eyelashes. The guardrail made a line across her back. Truck, she said. You got one? He swept the light. The hill fell away into a cut full of scrub. Nothing down there but the ghosts of cars that had made worse choices. Behind, she said, and he turned and saw his own wrecker sitting there, flashers painting the world with that worn-out orange, looking older than it had 10 seconds ago. Sure is, he said, trying a smile. His breath steamed. He crouched, knees popping in the way knees do after 40. You need an ambulance? No, she said, and put her hand on his wrist. Her fingers were cold and left 5 little points of fire where they touched. Mile 23, she said, and her voice dropped so the rain had to lean in to hear it. That's where we are, ma'am. Now, she said. His comm cracked. Dawson, you take that deer on 30 yet? It was dispatch, Bev, her voice smoke-scraped and fond of him, in the way people are fond of men who show up more than they don't. Got a situation at 23, he told her. Possible. I don't know. Someone needs help. He glanced at the woman. You hurt? She shook her head. The flashers strobed across her face and made her pupils want to leave. Sir, Bev said, something changing in her tone. You there? Yeah, he said, looking out across the cut. For a second, he thought he saw movement on the opposite shoulder, a flicker of reflective tape, the suggestion of another man exactly his size doing exactly this. He blinked rain out of his eyes. When he looked back, the woman had stood. She was not wet anymore. That was the thought his brain tried on. It was wrong, but it got him closer. She was wet, and under it something else was dry, and that wrongness made the hair on his forearms stand up like prairie grass under a storm. "You hear me?" Bev insisted. The radio hissed like a cat. "I hear you." He took the woman's elbow the way you take the elbow of somebody who will let you only because you're both pretending. "Let's get you in the cab," he said. "Heat's on." "I can run you to—" "Don't," she said, and there was kindness in the word. "You don't want me in that cab." He laughed once because men do. "I've had worse," he said. "Had a guy with an upset stomach I had to—" "Dawson," Bev said in his ear like she was right behind him. "We got an accident at 23. You there?" "I'm at—" he started, and then a set of headlights came around the bend above, fast and wrong, the way a car moves when a driver thinks the road will be the same this time as every time. Dawson stood and raised a hand he knew they couldn't see. The car hit a slick and began that slow-motion ballet of losing it, nose dipping, tail swinging, a fish realizing water is a lie. It kissed the guardrail at 20 pounds per square inch and shrugged it up and over like a man a much smaller woman. The car slid to a stop at an angle across the lane, driver's side against the rail. "Jesus," Dawson said. He ran, legs remembering. He wrapped the glass with his mag light, the satisfying authority of metal on safety mechanisms. A man inside turned his face. 40, maybe. Wide forehead. Panic making his mouth tidy. "You okay?" Dawson shouted. "And if you ever want to know whether you are a liar or a man of faith, that is the moment." "I can't— door," the guy gasped, pointing. Dawson yanked. It gave 3 inches and locked with a refusal that felt personal. He set his shoulder and pulled the way you do when you know you'll pay for it tomorrow. The door gave like old bread. He dragged the guy out by his coat because sometimes you get to be bad at grace. Bev on the radio. "Ambulance en route. Weather's bad. You alone out there?" "No," he said, and realized he meant it. He turned to ask the woman to get in the cab anyway, damn her opinion, and she was standing where he had left her, hands at her sides, rain making her hair a curtain. Her eyes were not on him. They were on his wrecker. His flashers strobed. Between the strokes in the black, he saw his truck with someone in it. Someone in the driver's seat, hat on, face turned away. He felt a weird sideways nausea, like looking down a stairwell in a dream. He took a step. The woman took his arm. "Don't," she said. "You won't like what you see." "I'm all curiosity," he said, "because jokes make ladders over some pits." He took another step. The other driver in the seat turned his head 1 notch toward him. For a second, the world hiccuped. He smelled diesel and something like a hot penny. He heard the CB say his name again. He saw himself, not like a mirror with the smugness removed, but like a photograph you took last year and forgot. The same stupid hat, the same notch in the ear where an earring had caught once, the same bruise on the forearm he'd gotten 2 nights ago wrestling with a lock. "Dawson," the radio breathed, but it wasn't Bev. It was him. "What the—" the guy he'd pulled from the sedan said, adjusting his coat like that would make the night behave. The woman squeezed his arm. Her hand was very strong. "You hear us when you're doing what you're going to do," she said softly. "That's all. That's what the radio is. You argue with yourself like a man on a bar stool." He laughed, because the alternative was standing there listening to his own voice ask him to move. "This? A trick?" She shook her head. "No, it's ugly. That's not the same." Another set of headlights. Another car, slower, braked with dignity, stopped. A woman inside made the "oh God" face at him. He waved her around, easy palms. The rain thickened the way rain can, like a quilt being thrown. "Why me?" he asked the woman without looking at her. "Because you stop," she said. "Because you like your job." She said it like a compliment and like a diagnosis. He stepped to his wrecker and pulled the door open as if he could trick himself. The seat was empty. The radio crackled with the tiny paper bag sound of static. "Mile 30, Bev said, cautious now, as if she'd entered someone else's room. "You hear me?" "I hear you," he said, and rubbed his face like a man trying to wipe off a dream. The woman had moved closer to the guardrail. She looked out over the cut as if the land remembered something she needed. "They put a cross down there last spring," she said. "2 kids in a Civic. Mama comes once a week. The rain keeps washing the flowers off and she picks them up with her hands." "You one of the kids?" he asked, and there was no teasing in it. Only the way you talk in hospitals at 3 a.m. "No," she said. "I'm the reason there's a cross." The words were simple and made a weight he felt in his knees. He looked at her and finally saw the thing his brain had been trying to make into weather. The parka wasn't puffy. It was bloated. The hair stuck not because of rain, but because water remembers. Her boots didn't squeak. They made the faintest sound, like chair feet on tile in a quiet kitchen. "Shit," he said, softly, respectful. She smiled, small and crooked. "Sorry," she said, and for a second she looked younger and tired. "You were supposed to take mile 30. I came here." "You always do." She touched the roof of his wrecker with her fingertips, a little blessing. "You keep people for a while," she said. "It helps." "What are you for, then?" he asked. She looked out into the rain again. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe to tell you when." Headlights again. The ambulance this time, lit up like a cheap Santa, washing the rock walls with white, red, white. Paramedics spilled out with bags and practiced eyes. One glanced at Dawson and then at the woman and did not see her, because that's another thing paramedics learn. "Sir," the EMT said to the sedan driver. "Any head pain? Any neck pain?" "Only existential," the man said, trying a joke, too. The woman stepped back, like a person leaving the room quietly so the patient can rest. "Mile 30, she said again, not to him, not entirely. "Now?" he asked, embarrassed by how much he wanted orders. She nodded. He climbed into his seat. The radio was a warm square under his hand. "Bev," he said, "going to 30. "Copy," she said, obvious relief in the single word. "Watch for a deer. Might already be 2 of them." He pulled out. In the rear view, he saw the woman by the rail lift a hand. He saw the ambulance people turn and turn again and never land on her. He saw his own brake light smear red across the wet black like a wound. At mile 28, the radio said his name and then said nothing. At mile 30, a deer lay in the slow lane, legs folded under like a prayer gone wrong. He halted by the hocks and felt the familiar humble weight of the world not being about him. He worked. He swore when the tow rope took skin from his palms because he'd forgotten gloves. He moved on. At dawn, he parked at the diner with the oily coffee and the waitresses who call men hon, like it's penance. The sky went from black to that tired blue that means someone got another chance. He sat and stirred his coffee until the waitress arched an eyebrow and took it away and brought fresh. On the CB by the salt shakers, somebody had left a little post-it. It said, "Dawson, mile 23, thank you." The handwriting was neat and old-fashioned, the E's made with a flourish like a woman born when people taught penmanship. He stuck it to the dash with the other talismans, prayer card of a saint he couldn't name, a ticket from the fair the summer before his wife left, a picture of a wrecker with a smiley face his grandson had drawn. He keyed the mic and said to no one, "Copy that." On the way back to the yard, he flipped to Channel 19 because talking to strangers felt better than not. He said, "Road slick at 23. Keep your lanes." Men he'd never meet said "copy" in voices that carried cigarettes and breakfast over long distances. When he hit mile 23 again, the sun was on the rock face, making green from the ferns and gold from the trickles of iron 9 cars out of 10 never notice. The guardrail was bent. There were new scrapes on the asphalt. He pulled onto the shoulder and put on his flashers just because. He looked down into the cut. The cross there was tipped a little, flowers bedraggled. He climbed down the embankment and set it right and put the flowers in their place. Not because it would matter, but because somebody would arrive and see, and their day would be a little less like the one they feared. He stood with his hand on the wood and felt the tiniest buzz under his palm, like the hum of a wire. "Dawson," the radio said in the cab, very softly. "Here," he said, very softly back. The radio said nothing else. It didn't need to. He climbed up and in and touched the post at once, the way you touch a person's shoulder when they pass behind you. He pulled onto the highway and went to where he needed to be, which turned out to be where he always went. Sometimes, later, on bad nights, when he clicks the CB off because the noise makes his thoughts stutter, he still hears his own voice coming through the glove box, saying his name, saying a mile marker, saying, "Now." And when he does, he doesn't argue. He turns the wheel and goes.